Well, to help us put context on what the Malawi vote outcome portends for democracy in Malawi and Africa in general is international affairs commentator Abel Oyeyo. Abel, many thanks for joining us on Bottomline Africa today. Malawi becomes the second African country after Kenya to annul a presidential election, but for the opposition candidate to then go on and win a rerun is unprecedented. A big win for Malawi, a big win for democracy in Africa as well. Your thoughts on this?
I think that is exactly as you put it. But the first indication of the strength of the whole process of electioneering in Malawi is the annulment of the first election, whereby, of course, you understand there is some kind of totalitarianism. So we didn't expect the courts to actually nullify the election, but they did that. And obviously, the kind of indictment which they offered in their ruling was very strong, and they insisted on the elections body to be, reconstituted so as to make sure the election is an A election. It was, they were calling the first election as C+ election. Mm-hmm. So the A election has been conducted, and for some reason, I think democracy has been vindicated, and the rightful, person has been able to get elected to office. Mm-hmm. And I think I like the kind of speech he delivered. It's conciliatory, it's, magnanimous. It's reaching out to the losers and saying, is the president for all Malawians. Right.
Yes. Even before we get to the broader picture of what this means, what is it in the in-tray there for Lazarus Chakwera?
Say that again?
What is in the in-tray now for the new president of Malawi?
I think Chakwera looks very sober from the way he's expressing himself, and he knows the enormity of the job he has at hand, which, of course, the first project is the unification of Malawi as a nation, and then from there, he has, of course, to strive towards, cultivating a solid economic basis for all Malawians. Mm-hmm. So he looks like he understands what he has to do, and it's good. And then he's not a new person to politics. He's been the leader of opposition, he understands how government works, he knows where the problems are. And I think he also understands the symbolic nature of the election. As an opposition leader getting to win in this kind of climate, he knows it's a good message to not just Malawians, but the continent.
All right. And from a largely authoritarian regime, like you were saying, it wasn't expected in the first place that the court would annul the first vote. It's a significant moment that shows that neither the courts in Malawi nor the electorate were willing to be bullied. What does it mean in the bigger African context in terms of democracy?
Well, we've seen it happen here. Under the leadership of Maraga, the election was as well nullified in Kenya. So for Kenyans, it's not new. And I think it's a message, and it's a good message for the rest of, the dictatorial establishments or, countries we have around, that at some point people just get tired. And I think Malawi has made tremendous progress when it comes to independence of the judiciary, and that is why the justices of the court were able to, have the confidence to actually nullify the election. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an inspiration for the rest of the continent, whereby, you find the executive, in most cases, is heavy on the judiciary. So the members of the judiciary in most African countries can now go ahead and say there's a precedence on which they can copy and make sure the tenets of democracy are safeguarded during elections. All
right. And I mean, this brings a new dawn to Africa's elections altogether. Malawi itself was bitterly divided in the run-up to this election. How do you think reconciliation is likely to look like in Malawi?
Well, it has to do with what we call carving a path, which is not about revenge and paying back, but bringing guys together. Malawi has a couple of challenges, of course. We have ethnic divisions, political divisions, religious divisions. But Chakwera comes from a religious background, and I expect him to actually reach out in a very genuine way, and he made it very clear in his speech. So it has to do with making sure that the guys who are beaten in the elections are not, pushed to the peripheries. He does not have to apply the same tactics which were being applied by the outgoing regime. And something else I might want to point out is he came out clearly and said that it has been a case of dynasties sitting on the people for so long. He actually pointed out that we've had two families running the political system for so long. Mm-hmm. So it's let's call it a triumph of the hustlers, if you want, right, if you can say. So again, I think it's going to mirror what we experience in our discussions in our Kenyan political space. Mm-hmm. For quite some time.
Let's compare the situations. I mean, these are the only two African countries to annul a presidential vote. How would you compare the situation in Kenya versus the situation in Malawi?
I think the courts are the same. There is some kind of boldness in the courts, whereby, you know, they are not intimidated by the powers, about the strong arm of the executive. That is both Kenya and Malawi. And then, of course, we have a very solid opposition base both in Malawi and Kenya. What I'd expect, of course, going forward is a similar case whereby the opposition in Malawi now, which is going to be led by the former president, will be very, very tough, just like the opposition in Kenya has been tough for a while now. It's unfortunate now Raila shifted to the government. Mm-hmm. So being an outgoing president, our former president, Mutharika knows what it means to run a government. He knows the nooks and crannies of Malawi. So he cannot keep quiet whenever he sees something going out of control. So both countries have, you know, a strong opposition. When Chakwera was there, it was very strong. And Mutharika is likely to be strong as well. So I think the rest of the continent has so much to learn from what's happening both in Kenya and Malawi.
We're talking at the numbers in Malawi after the annulment in the second election there. Lazarus Chakwera got about 2.6 million votes against Peter Mutharika's 1.7 million votes. You can see a massive gap there. And I mean, the difference between these numbers and the numbers from the previous election are massive. What does it say about the custodians of elections as it happened in Malawi, and how transparent can we make that, even in the case for Kenya?
Well, I think the numbers point to a very serious problem in the first election. And of course, as the courts pointed out, there was massive, you know, messing up of the election. And the numbers have come out and vindicated the complaints which were raised by the opposition, which is now the government. And in Kenya, of course, it's different because we do not have what we can call a genuine reason, because the former prime minister, you know, objected to the whole idea of getting back to the contest. So we couldn't be able to know what actually had happened, because we can say the president was a sole candidate in our repeat election. But in Malawi, you know, it's a clear case of the elections body mishandling the elections. And I think going forward, it's a lesson. It's a lesson for them. It's a lesson for the rest of the continent, that they don't have to mess the election, because sooner or later they get exposed. So I think Malawi is likely to, if they stick to the path, it's likely to be some country to learn from, you know, as far as elections and, you know, politicking are concerned.
All right, many thanks. There is Abel Oyeyo. He is an international affairs commentator, putting into context what the Malawi vote outcome means for Malawi and